Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Keith Andrew, and you're watching Breaking Barriers. Today, we sit down with George Ellis. That's right, upcoming film producer George Ellis will be a guest on the Keith Andrew Network. With that being said, for people who want to know, what is the Keith Andrew Network? Whole point of my talk show is to show people that even with having a learning disability, I can still amount to something. And at the same time, I'm able to turn myself into an example for people out there dealing with any types of learning disabilities and disabilities to never give up and prove people wrong. Prove to them that labels do not dictate who you are and who you're going to be. So prove to them and still amount to something. With that being said, George Ellis standing by, and you're going to hear from him when we come back from this commercial break. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and comment today.
Hi, this is George Ellis. I was just interviewed by Keith Andrew. It was my second time doing his show, and it was a great event. I look forward to seeing the full length. There's going to be a preview coming up shortly, and it's always a good time with Keith. He's a good interviewer.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the quick commercial break. I'm your host, Keith Andrew, and the following is brought to you by the Keith Andrew Network. You're watching Breaking Barriers. We're here with a great guest. He's been on my show a number of times, and he's always welcome to be on the show. Mr. George Ellis, thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me, Keith. As you said, we've met before on the air. That was a great experience, and I'm sure this is going to be another opportunity for us to chat and talk about things, and look forward to it.
No, absolutely. So the first subject we're going to talk about is what are some of the new projects that you've been working on?
So the new project that I'm working on now is actually a documentary on fashion models, which we're going to be filming in a couple of weeks. And this is an interesting topic because a few years ago, there was a documentary on fashion models. It was called Supermodels. And it was the big names. But, those big names, they come from somewhere. They started out not as supermodels. And so I have a group of models that we'll be looking at and talking to and see where they're at in their careers. Some people, they do this as sort of a hobby, a side thing. Some of them do it as in the hopes of getting captured by some companies or a big promoter who can do a full-time opportunity for them so they can have something bigger than what they're doing now. So this is more going to be like a behind the scenes type of documentary, and then one-on-one conversations with each of the models and the photographers, because we can't forget that the photographers play a big role, because they're the ones who actually are looking at how do I take this picture. They might take 10, 12 pictures and have to pick one from that particular segment and then go on to another segment, depending on how the models are dressed, depending on the background. And so this is a good opportunity for both the photographers and the models.
No, absolutely. So the next one I want to talk to you about, the first picture that's going to be on the screen, is you were the finalist in a dramatic short. What can you tell us about that picture?
So this was Starstruck. And this was a picture that I got into and involved with the director and writer. His name is Les Carpenter. He's been working at Disney World for 36 years here in Orlando. And, he does independent films besides his regular job at Disney. So this is not a Disney film, but he wanted to film, a very lifelike story on top of Mount Lee, which is where the Hollywood sign is. And so we all traveled there. Some of the people who were the cast and crew were local to California, but some people actually wanted to volunteer on this type of film. And I knew one girl, she flew, I think, from Minnesota to volunteer to be on the set and to help out. And so we filmed it. The editing took a while. Once that was done, we put it into some festivals, and we were the finalist in the Central Florida Film Festival a few weeks ago. And it was also shown at the Golden State Film Festival in California at the famous theater, what used to be called the Chinese Theater. Now it has a corporate name. And I couldn't make it for that trip, but a lot of the cast and crew were able to make it out and see viewing that film there. Right now, actually, just maybe an hour ago, we decided to make a DVD, a physical DVD. And I think that's good because some of the older folks like myself, we're used to a physical thing, and we like to have, something in hand. And the cast and crew, we have like sort of a blanket Instagram system, and we told them, and a lot of people were happy that this was happening.
No, that's funny you should mention that because that's the next subject I want to talk to you about is do you prefer DVDs? It's really cool as we're talking when it's on screen. A real DVD that's bound in. Do you prefer physical items than digital? Because the reason for that is you know, if the power goes out, if you don't have the internet, say, okay, whatever, it's uncensored freedom of speech. Yeah, what am I supposed to do? So, twiddle my thumb, stick my thumb up my ass. And what am I supposed to do? Oh, hey, I have a DVD. Plug it in. DVDs are perfect because you can watch it anytime, any place, anywhere. The biggest thing is that it's I don't know if that's as a pro, but DVDs they are yours. Period. My problem with anything you download, my brother always gets his music, and my dad has the audiobooks that he always likes. You are paying I don't know, 20, $30 for a film or an audiobook. But the biggest problem I have against streaming is you do not own it. You are renting it. And you're like, oh, well, what's the difference? The difference is a DVD is once you have it, it's yours. Streaming, they can take it down, they can edit it, they can change things to it. But the biggest thing is you don't own it. So my question for you is, how do you feel about DVDs versus streaming?
I like streaming because actually I like not owning it. And that's because, at this point in my life, I'm trying to get rid of all my junk. I have, a lot of DVDs and those are not junk, but it takes up space and I got to think about where's this going to go when I'm gone. That's the part of streaming that I like. The part about the DVD that I like is actually having something in hand. And I've got a quick story for you. Last night, our Wi-Fi was kind of shaky, and so I said, let's just watch a DVD. So I pulled out this. I have this collection of Seinfeld. I said, let's watch this. So I took it out, plugged it into the DVD, and saw nothing. And I couldn't understand. And I realized that I have a new TV set, and I never plugged in the DVD to the new TV set. And the DVD has that yellow, red, and white cable, and you have to have a connector to be able to plug that into the new type of TV. And I didn't have that, of course. So fortunately, the Wi-Fi came back, so we were able to watch our movie, which was Sam and Kate, which was pretty good. And but of course, the technology has to work too, right?
Right. Well, but that's the biggest thing is I'm not against streaming as in, for an example, my talk show's been streaming on YouTube for the past 13 and a half years. You can watch all 1,251 episodes thanks to you on YouTube. But the thing is like if you buy like a video game, like I'm a Dragon Ball fan. If you buy a Dragon Ball or a wrestling game and they decide, hey, we're no longer going to have this supported, you wasted your money. So actually having a physical game in your hand is like I can play this 10 years, 20 years from now, instead of someone feeling like, nope, yeah, you had your time. Now we're gonna take it away.
Right.
It's kind of like, am I gonna get the $30 back? It's kind of like, that's my biggest thing about it.
No, you're right. You're right. One of the things that I like about both of them is compared to, think about me. I was growing up in the 60s. We couldn't stop the program to go get, some snacks and come back and resume it. So now it's like what a luxury to be able to stop the DVD or stop the stream and, go out, do something. Even sometimes I don't have time. Like I watched the movie Weapons the other day, and it's not for everyone, especially for me in my house. Nobody else wants to watch that kind of movie. So I just said, well, I'll just watch it on my own time. And I stopped it, waited weekend to go by. And then once the weekend was over, I was alone. I could get to watch it. And so that's sort of the beauty of our technology compared to what we had 50 years ago.
Oh, I have something similar to that. Me and my brothers were big, huge wrestling fans, and we always watched it occasionally. But back in, and now I'm 38 and I'm freaking dating myself. Um, about okay, 30 years ago, give or take, during WWF versus WCW, we used to have one in one room. We had WWF on VHS to recorded, and then in my other room, in my brother's room, he would tape WCW, and we used to run back and forth because it was at the same time. And then there was other times where we had to take a family trip or somewhere. And like, oh well, we don't want to miss it. We used to put the VHS in there, put a timer, and have it set at a certain time. God forbid it didn't freaking record.
Oh
But
yeah.
now it's so much easier. You press a button on your DVR, you pause it. We got spoiled.
Oh yeah. That's for sure.
Now, the next one I want to talk to you about is what can you tell us about your number film that you're working on, or are you working on, or you did, called Eden Trail?
Yeah, so Eden Trials is actually a film that came out last year. And that was a co-production with Stephanie Curvez, who was the writer. And, she did environmental studies at UCF. And so it's an environmental film. And what it is, it's, she also collects sugar gliders, which are like these little animals. And I think she's got like 10 of them or something. And so a lot of the cast were her own sugar gliders, and she was able to mimic that they were talking by feeding them, they were moving their mouth. But anyway, the sugar gliders become the trial and jury of humans who have slowly made the planet a worse place to live. And there's she plays one of the roles, and the humans are determined to be guilty, and so the end of the movie is sort of two human skeletons, and they were determined to have to die because of what they did to the planet so that the animal life could survive. That was an interesting film. It was also at the Central Florida Film Festival. So I had two films during that. It was over here in Claremont, Florida, and that was a good one. We had a good time doing that.
Now, for people who are interested in working with your company, what can you tell us about your company?
So it's really a sole proprietorship, and you can find out information on www.coronadobeachproductions.com, like just like this. And there's information there, contact information. There's some film clips. There's also a in the navigation bar a book that we did that we talked about, you and I, during our last session, that I co-wrote with my son, and then he's writing a second book now, which not only am I not involved with it, but I don't even know the title or the content. So it'll be interesting to find out what all that is going to be about.
Hey, if you want to write a book about me, I would really appreciate that.
Well, you need to talk to him about that.
Actually, while on the subject, would you be interested in doing a film about me?
You know, that's something that I get offered a lot, and so most of the films that I get, it works like this. You know, somebody, or usually it's a group of people, they have an idea. You know, they start, thinking about it, brainstorming, and then somebody says, "Well, I want to do this. I'm going to write the script." They write the script, and they start picking. Who would be a good role for this, and it's usually people that they worked with before, and then they come to me and they say, well, we have this idea to do this, we have the script, so and so is going to be the director, we have the cast, we just need some funding for that. And the funding, we do very, I want to say, micro budget films, because a lot of the folks who are involved, they work for not much, and they also sometimes volunteer. And the reason is that most short films, there really is not a market for short films. So that's why it would be hard to find a short film where you could actually make money. Some people have told me that, you can put it on Tubi. But most of the chatter that I see online is that, you might make some pennies, maybe some dollars, but it's really not, you're not going to be, retiring on your film from a short, independent short film. But you would be an interesting topic, that's for sure. But I could put you on the list of potentials.
There's one of my favorite wrestlers, Chris Jericho. His gimmick when he was in the WWE, he actually brought it to AEW. He walks around with the clipboard, and it's like, you know what? I give you an example. You know what I do? Well, let's talk. If we don't want to talk about political things, I'm gonna throw myself underneath the bus. I don't like Trump. So, like, you know what I don't like about Trump supporters? You know what I do with Trump supporters? You just made the list. You write. So every time I hear you made the list, I always think of his gimmick. He walks around with a clipboard of his enemies list, and as he writes your name down. But while we're on the subject, tonight is WWE NXT. That's available on the CW. It's available on YouTube, Peacock, and ESPN. Are you a fan of wrestling?
It's funny you mentioned that, because I'm close to one of the radio stations here, 104.1, and they have a show in the morning called Monsters in the Morning. And they have sort of gravitated towards wrestling because one of the guest hosts, I think she comes on once or twice a week. She is a wrestler. Her name is Amber Nova, and she has had several bouts with you have the station helps her out with some of the sponsoring and all that. But I have trouble figuring out what wrestling really is, because I think that it's a spectrum of different things. I think sometimes it's, I want to say, legitimate, combat. I want to say sometimes it's theatrical. And there's probably within those sort of another spectrum of, so I'm not that familiar with it enough to be able to say I'm a fan. I could say that I'm certainly aware, and sometimes I'll watch some stuff just to kind of try to figure it out. But amongst all the list of things that I'm still trying to figure out at my age, I could say maybe wrestling is one of them. That's what I would like to ask, is like, what kind of wrestling do you do? Is it now, do you wrestle?
No, I know. I can't wrestle myself out of a wet paper bag.
Okay. So, who are the ones that are theatrical? Who are the ones that are, it's a real combat, kind of like, boxing, like professional boxing, some people really get hurt. And that's the thing that I have yet to figure out.
Well, here's an example. Recently he retired in the ring, but he said he's got to retire at SummerSlam. Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar, former UFC champion, WWE champion. He is a real combat wrestler. He had a match with Randy Orton a couple years ago where he busted him open by using his freaking elbows. Even though there's a lot of criticisms, he could have gave a guy a concussion, but he is a combat wrestler. There's a
Right.
lot of other wrestlers who are not great, but they're great entertainers, like The Rock, John Cena. They're better actors than in-ring performers. And no
Right.
disrespect to any of them, The Rock and Cena, because I would like to work with them.
Yeah.
They are better performers than being in-ring competitors. And there's some wrestlers who are better stand-up comedians than being in ring. So you have different varieties. You have people that can branch out to be actors like The Rock, Cena, Hulk Hogan. He was one of those things that you saw him as a cartoon character, but he couldn't really make the transition because he was kind of goofy. But when you see Cena, The Rock being serious, okay, these guys you can get behind. There's certain wrestlers that try to be actors, right? Don't even try because you're just freaking horrible.
Right. Right.
But
Well,
it's hard to make a transition.
well, for being a medical doctor and having spent the last 5 or 6 years before I really retired doing mostly emergency room work. And for me as a urologist, you go into the emergency room when they call you. You're not always there. But I remember there was a guy who came in. He was part of the rodeo locally, and he came in with a bad injury, to the groin, and to look at activities where you actually get injured, sometimes you kind of question, but everybody does what they want to do. Somebody comes to the emergency room and they have an issue that I can handle, I'm going to handle it. It doesn't matter how it happened and what had happened and what they want to do. My focus is on the person and their injury. And so that's kind of how I look at it. I don't think any of that is going to go away. No different than you probably heard about. They used to be more prevalent about gang fights and things like that, and knifing and gunshots and things like that. And people would do that, and then I would see them. And so whatever we had in our in our toolbox to help them, that's what we did.
Well, for our listeners, and I'm very curious too, let's go back. What made you decide to become a doctor, and why did you retire?
So I'm retired from full-time practice, but I still do volunteer work in a clinic where the patients are either homeless or have no health insurance. And so that's a volunteer thing. And so I continue to practice in that way. But becoming a doctor goes back a long time. My dad was a pediatrician in New York City. That's where I was raised. And he would sometimes take me to the hospital when he would make rounds. And I couldn't go into the patient rooms. I would just have to wait, like on a chair or at the nurse's lounge. But I got inspired by the help that was being provided, and the whole focus was helping people trying to overcome some kind of medical condition or those things. And so I kind of went on and said, that's going to be my destiny. I thought that my destiny was going to be to do open heart surgery, but I changed because urology was such a diverse field and an interesting field, because we take care of kidney stones and urinary infections, and we do a lot of different kinds of cancer surgery, male issues, if you know what I mean, dysfunction and infertility and things like that. That I think that was one of the memorable moments that I had. Was a couple came to me, and the husband had an issue that could be handled with surgery, so they could have kids. And I took care of him, and he did fine. And the biggest moment was when I got a card from them that said, our baby girl was born, last month. And that's rewarding.
I have to send you a funny skit of D Generation X. They did something a couple years ago where it's funnier when you see it, but I will explain it. There's for Triple H, Shawn Michaels, X-Pac News, and Ellis Outlaws, and Billy Gunn says, "Excuse me while I whip this out," and he whips out a water gun, and and it only dribbles off the tip. And Triple H says, "Oh, don't worry, Billy. At our old age, it just it happens." But the biggest thing about the wrestling is it's not the PG, but it's PG, PG's killing it. It's the writing. If you're not invested in the characters, then you're wasted. There's just a show called NXT, like I said, it's on today on the CW. Make sure to definitely watch it. The WWE NXT, really great, really wonderful. You're gonna enjoy it. And the point of it is you get these nobodies of like myself, and you can turn them into someone. It's like, oh my God, I can't wait till they go to the main roster because they invest so much time into this character for the past 2, 3 years. And you're like, this person is going to be the face of the company. Or if they're not going to be the face of the company, they're going to be someone that you have invested your time in, and you're going to enjoy watching them going forward. Some of the talent that they stick with, and some of the talent are kind of like, what the hell will happen? And but those are the writers. But my thing is, especially the question I want to ask you, you spend so much time and effort into your films. The biggest question I want to ask you wrapping up the show is what is the hard part? What's the hardest part about catering to the right audience?
That is the hardest part. Not only catering to the right audience, but catering to an audience. Finding, anybody can make a film, a video, a music, video, but who's going to watch it?
Right.
For the most part, when you start out, it's your family and friends, and they're going to say, "Oh, you're doing a great job. That's wonderful." And, of course, but you're looking for a larger audience. And one of the things that I did that sort of fell into was here in Florida, there's an organization called the Organization of Independent Filmmakers. And every quarter or so, they have a film challenge where a lot of the films that I've done have entered and have won either nominations or awards. And what they do is they have a whole afternoon of these short films. They have to be 9 minutes or less. And then there are judges who vote on them, and then people get awards. So a recent film that I did, which is called Mortal Sin, we won in Tampa, the Organization of Independent Filmmaker Tampa division. We won Best Picture. We also won Best Director, Best Story, and Best Actor. So of 13 awards, we got 4 of them. And that was another very, very rewarding opportunity. So I think that when you're doing anything to sort of get together and network with groups and try to do things, even though everyone's sort of independent, you can still share ideas, share stories. And actually, like I do, I share, movie opportunities that, I can put my name on, my company name on. And I think that the people who I help, because they usually have a financial restriction, they're very aware that it's hard to do, but that it's doable because some people want to do the same thing and they have the resources.
No, absolutely. Now we're wrapping up the show. I do have a couple questions for you off the air. But same thing I asked you the first time, I'm going to ask you again. When I approached you to be a guest on my talk show once again, what made you say yes? And how do you feel now? But I'm going to add something to that. Now that I charge a 25, between 22 $25, was it like a red flag for you? Or do you understand that, hey, he has a learning disability, he's a talk show host who's trying to support himself, he can't really work? For people out there, you're talking to them, not me. What made you say yes, and was that like a red flag for you?
So are we still on the air?
Yes.
Okay, so it has nothing to do with any disabilities or anything. It has to do with the opportunity that you offer to have people showcase what they do and have a honest discussion about it. And you're a good host, and you asked very pertinent, appropriate questions, and so the fee. I think the fee will be an issue for some people. There's no question. I mean, I know some people that they have to spend $10 on something and they have to think twice about it. But I think for people who want to get their message out, there's always a price to marketing, and that's the thing is that this is part of marketing, and my experience with you in the past has been good. I've referred my son to you also, to do a show. And so it's a good opportunity, I think, for people to showcase their what they do.
And how do you feel now, and where do you recommend it to other people?
Oh yeah, I would recommend it to other people because you have a following. I mean, like you said, you've been doing this for 13 years, and I don't know what your analytics look like. I haven't even checked. But whenever there's an opportunity, you and I could be at a brewery somewhere and talking about this, and you and I will hear it. But for this, like many podcasts that I look at, it's nice to hear the exchange and sort of the opinion going back and forth. I think that's what this brings to a general population.
No, absolutely. I do have a couple questions for you off the air. If you're watching this it will air in 24 hours. That's the new thing in my talk show. If it airs on Friday, it will air on Monday. But in 24 hours, it will be shared on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. The first 3 minutes will be available later on today on TikTok and Instagram. By George, wrapping up, it was a real honor and privilege. You're more than welcome to be on my show anytime. And I just want to say thank you for supporting a talk show host with a disability. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Keith. It was always, as always, a good opportunity.